Hello, 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 and welcome to the College of Creation. My name is Dan.
And my name is Michael.
And we are Dungeons & Dragons DMs who love to homebrew items, spells, creatures, and features for D&D. And this is a show where we make brand new homebrew every single week based on prompts that we get from our listeners, our community, our good friends out there in the world who tell us to make things. And this week... we had another interesting prompt that was more lore-based than homebrew, like specific, like make a monster, make an item. I suppose strictly it was make a monster, but it did require that you build in a lot of lore to this monster.
Yeah.
We were asked to build the big bad for a world or an encounter that was taken over by doppelgängers.
Doppelgängers, yep.
Which is an interesting creature within the world of D&D, one that I have certainly used before, and I feel like features quite heavily in like mid-low tier play games. It's
like
a little bit more of
10.
a beefy monster than your typical beasts that you're fighting at low challenge ratings. And notably, doppelgangers are often involved in more intense and complex like plotting. They're more intelligent and generally have some sort of aim or goal that necessitates them taking on another form, looking like another person. Usually that's in service of like a greater, maybe socio-political sort of plot line.
Yeah, doppelgangers are tricky because you, as a game master, have to weigh how perceptive your players are above table. Mm-hmm. Like you really have to know what your players want and what their play styles are. Because if you start throwing doppelgangers into your game disguised as people they know or things that should feel familiar, and you don't telegraph that very well, sometimes you could just be adventuring with a doppelganger for many, many months in real time, like out of game time, and your party might never know. So it is a delicate balance between making sure the doppelganger acts like a doppelganger but also is convincing enough to make sense in your plot. And I do agree it's not a monster you throw into a dungeon crawl. Typically, you don't just show up and kill a bunch of monsters and one of them happens to be an untransformed doppelganger. That's really rare. So this was an interesting prompt, that doppelgangers were the central conceit.
And I'll be very honest and forthcoming here. I don't like what I made. I don't like what I came up with. Doppelgangers, while fun, are also like there is sort of one thing to do there.
Yeah.
There's not that much more in terms of the ability set that it has. You know, it can shapeshift. It can frighten people by looking, having a terrifying visage. And it can detect thoughts. And if you are to expand those out to make like a more powerful version of said thing, how far can you go?
Right. What's the stretch?
And honestly, I don't like what I made. I didn't really find a good idea across all of the ideas that I ran through. Maybe it's just personal opinion that like a doppelganger plot is not the most exciting plot to me, or not the most engaging or interesting to me personally as a DM.
Let's get into it then. Let's take what you have and maybe we can work it out. Spitball some ideas to increase the breadth of what you brought.
Sure. My initial process was really around, it's important to understand like what your villains want and what they're willing to do to get that thing. And usually people have decent reasons for wanting a thing, right? Like there's not that many villains, I don't think, or I don't think most of the villains in your world should follow the like Joker mold of like kind of not really wanting anything specific. And I hemmed and hawed around a lot of stuff. A thing that I thought about a lot for some reason, I don't know why, was The Sims.
Oh, yeah.
It was just like, what if, this thing just like is powerful enough, or like just wants to turn all these doppelgangers into regular people and then just like play out a fantasy of a world, just like in The Sims. But then you have like puppet master stuff, and I'm like, well, but you're not controlling the doppelganger, so how does that work? But I kind of stuck with the idea, at least. And I was like, okay, well, what would get the party involved in a world or a town or a large situation where there's lots of doppelgangers, and how would they know? And I thought about a pretty standard sort of plot setup, I feel like, that feels a little tired of, like, your party leaves and they come back and now suddenly they're wanted for crimes because somebody wearing their face did something bad. And now, they have to like try and figure out how to exonerate themselves. And it just didn't seem that unique and fun. So I was like, what if I do the flip side? What if they come back to a place and actually everybody loves them for reasons that they don't recall or didn't do? And I think the bones are maybe interesting here, but the stat block I don't think is good. So I'll just read through what I have here. This is an adventure that I tentatively titled The Deep Fake. The basic premise is this. Your party returns to a town they have visited previously, but something is different. Once familiar faces are acting strangely. Some people seem to have forgotten previous conversations, and others seem convinced of events that your party cannot recall. The townsfolk hail your party as heroes now, praising them for acts they never carried out, or cannot recall. Everything seems pleasant enough, but there is something menacing deep beneath the peacefulness of this place. So the setup is that your adventurers return to a village or town they had business in before. You can drop this into any campaign setting is the idea here. Perhaps it was a friendly place before, maybe the party made no significant impression, or perhaps the local guard rushed them out with threats of imprisonment on their first foray. Either way, the town has now seemingly all but forgotten any negative encounters, and many denizens, in fact, recognize the party from their acts of heroism and selflessness. If they visit a tavern or a local market, they may be thanked for a bit of assistance that they do not recall providing, or they may be regaled by bards, detailing a heroic exploit that they carried out against a nasty foe threatening the city just recently, sometime when your party was decidedly elsewhere in the world. Additionally, when meeting with familiar NPCs from the party's earlier encounters in town, there's an 80% chance that the NPC in question behaves strangely, seems to have forgotten prior conversations, or has invented conversations that never happened. Relationships between NPCs that your adventurers might be aware of as having bad blood, such as two rival merchants, seem to have been mended overnight, and all within the city is peaceful and well, with only minor squabbles being settled within moments. All of this should hopefully inspire your party to investigate further and uncover eventually through scenes and more things that happen throughout the town, the actual plot, which is that doppelgangers have taken over most of the city and assumed the identities of nearly all the townsfolk. But these are no ordinary doppelgangers. These creatures have formed somewhat of a cult under the leadership of a very powerful entity called the Doppelgänger. This being believes and has convinced the others that it is a god or a deific being of some kind, and that they all of the doppelgangers, have a divine purpose. They have been created for the purpose of replacing the imperfect humanoids and remaking civilization as a perfect paradise where they get to live as humanoids and no longer as monsters.
That's good.
To this end, the Doppelgänger has concocted a plot to slowly replace all of the townsfolk and become the leader of this perfect city. The Doppelgänger is a much more powerful doppelganger and so can be anybody in town, but primarily chooses to live as a leader of some kind. This could be a religious figure, mayor, some sort of guild master with some significant sway over parts of the town. The doppelgangers want to replicate the people as closely as possible, so they do not kill them. Instead, they have imprisoned them somewhere hand-wavy nearby. I don't know. These are the details that I'm like, this should be an adventure because it doesn't make sense if you just like toss it in. You need many more puzzle pieces for this to make sense. Yeah. But they imprison them somewhere in order to regularly detect their thoughts and learn more about them so that they can solidify the ruse and actually the idea being that this Doppelgänger has convinced them all that they will in time become those people. You will no longer be a doppelganger. You would no longer be pretending to be this person, but you will, in all effect, be that person. And now your life is new and different, and you are, for all intents and purposes, just a humanoid. The Doppelgänger stat block is basically just a beefed up doppelganger. It has the same multi-attack and slam attack. It's got the same shapeshift ability. It also can detect thoughts, but that is part of a larger spell casting feature that I added some more spells to, including Charm Person, Detect Magic, Enhance Ability, Pass Without Trace, Enemies Abound, and Polymorph. I think especially the stat block is really underwhelming to me. I didn't know where to go with it beyond like, make it a more powerful doppelganger, but like it's hard to expand that super far.
Yeah.
And I just think that like, it kind of just wants to be another doppelganger, or like use the stat block of a doppelganger, but like add something else, or use the stat block of a slightly more powerful innate spellcasting creature and also give it a shape-shifting ability, so it's also basically a doppelganger. I would reskin more than I would actually create a monster for this, I guess what I'm trying to say. So I guess I feel like, and maybe that's where I'm at, is that I just feel like this wasn't a thing where I felt like I wanted to do a bunch of homebrew. This is like, oh, this is an interesting story, and I can write an interesting plot to throw some players into, but I don't really feel like I need to homebrew anything to make that happen.
Yeah.
And it almost felt like trying to homebrew something to make it happen felt like it was just going to make it muddier and possibly worse.
Yeah. These are my thoughts. These are my thoughts on this.
Tell me
because
your thoughts.
I 100% would like to play this as a player. I agree with you. I don't know if I would be interested in running this, just because it feels like the doppelganger installment of like the beginner's D&D box set, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's really solid. It has good beats. It has expected beats that your party would pick up on. Like things are telegraphed really well, and the quantity of telegraphed plot points is large. So even if a party misses something, like if this would be great for newer players, if things go over their head, there's always something else waiting right behind that first plot bead for them to pick up in a few moments. To that note, I think this is crafted really well. I think this is the foundation for a really successful low to mid-level adventure arc. One of the things I really like about this from a narrative perspective that is less geared towards newer players is the fact that the Doppelgänger has the potential to be a very Strahd-like villain.
Right.
It's not just a name looming out in the air and you get to the end and you finally meet Strahd and you fight him and that's the end. Strahd makes himself known and present throughout the entire story, and that makes him scarier, right?
Yeah.
This has that type of vibe, which is decidedly a higher level idea. So I think that the intention really will come through in the details once you figure out where the actual citizens of this town are located, the difficulty level of getting them back or saving them or whatever, choosing between killing the doppelgangers in the town or liberating them from the Doppelganger, convincing them that they are not, in fact, divine creatures. They're just being fooled. I think that this is really great. And I think maybe you, as we both have done so many times throughout this series, we have gotten too lost in the weeds trying to develop something new and something really creative. I don't know that there's anything here that you should have any disdain for, because I think this is a really cool start to an adventure that, like you said, could be dumped into most campaigns. unless they're really niche in their theme.
Well, like, it was tricky to figure out the stat block because I was like, well, it should be a doppelganger, right? Like, what other thing would have sway over doppelgangers? I guess maybe I could make it something fiendish or celestial if I really wanted to lean
Fiendish
into the idea that, like, it might be actually divine, but, like, in kind of a way that's twisted and weird.
Yeah.
I think I could stretch this out to an arc, especially bringing in that idea that, like, there is, you know, the leader of these people is maybe hiding in plain sight, and maybe it's not so much of a secret that, like, these people are not the people that they are claiming to be, but in fact are, like, wearing their faces. You know, maybe it is more of an open secret and, like, something that the party has to figure out how to deal with in a different way because it's not, like, menacing and under the surface, but it is very much like, oh, this is the status quo. What's happening here? How do we deal with that? When, you know, any threat. The idea was that, you know, a threat to this primary entity would come with a very large combat involving many other doppelgangers.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can't just fight this guy alone. That's just not going to happen. So, you know, trying to balance it to be like, okay, let's, you know, make this a BBEG with a ton of hit points, but also thinking like, but also probably in the neighborhood of, like, at least maybe a half dozen or more other doppelgangers in the same place.
100%. It could be a ticking clock situation,
Yeah.
too. The longer you take to deal with things, the more people in the city are replaced. Thus, the more you'll have to fight at the end or convert at the end or whatever your goal ends up being.
Right.
If you take a long time and investigate everything, they're going to start replacing almost everybody in the town, and that's going to be a much bigger problem for
and
you.
maybe it was that I got really stuck on the premise being that the world that I had to build this in had already been taken over by doppelgangers.
Yeah.
You know, that was the way the prompt was written, was, you know, BBEG for a world taken over by doppelgangers.
Taken over.
Which was maybe my starting point, and I think this does work better as a plot that starts very small, and there's, like, a couple of individual indications that, like, somebody you know just seems like a little bit off, and maybe you leave that town for a while, and then you come back and, like, things have gotten worse or stranger. I think that creates more of an interesting moral quandary for the players.
Yeah.
If there's something that vaguely, you know, appears to be or mirrors humanity among the doppelgangers, who I think are usually very often just thrown in as, like, complete agents of chaos. Maybe that's more the way to build this out a little bit further. Yeah, that's the piece that I was the most sort of interested and excited about. I just felt like the execution was a little bit lacking, but maybe there's still a way to claw it back.
I think so.
But I know that you were at least a little bit more excited about what you created than I was.
I think that I had a little bit easier of a time this week. I definitely started with a leg up because I did piggyback off of a previous installment from a previous episode.
Nice.
Originally, when we rolled this prompt, I was thinking something along the lines of, like, I, Robot, the movie I, Robot, where it's not doppelgangers, it's constructs that are slowly taking over and you know, doing human jobs and kind of, like, acting as servants at large. I didn't really like where I was going with that, so I kind of scrapped that pretty quickly. And then I ran into the same problem that you did, where doppelgangers in general are one-trick ponies as far as monsters go. So I thought the more interesting way to do this would be to make the villains of the story the mortals, the humans, the humanoids. And the invasion, quote unquote, the takeover by doppelgangers, this ideally would be for a party made up of those types of creatures. So the party is acting as the taking over force.
Oh,
as far as what the perspective of the enemies currently is. So I did piggyback off of the creation that we did 2 weeks ago, the post-apocalyptic mutant stat blocks.
Okay.
So if you would, please open your document.
Interesting.
I give you Parliament Bill PB 647-A, featuring supporting member Senator Jeff Wiseman.
Okay.
I've made 2 stat blocks for Senator Wiseman and a 3rd stat block down at the very bottom, which I will explain in a second. But we're going to start out just with a transcript excerpt from the Parliament floor this morning at 10:26 a.m. This is Senator Jay Wiseman speaking from the 16th District. Esteemed colleagues, I humbly appreciate this time on the floor to address you all, and we face nothing less than unprecedented times. With the 105th anniversary of the Weave's rupture looming ahead of us, we as a society can no longer ignore the cancer that has been released into our schools, our streets, our workplaces, and our homes. These abominations that were once people we knew. They were once our friends, our mothers, our sons, our masons, smiths, doctors, what have you. They are now something else, hidden among us, most able to pass around and within us with nothing to stop them, true ghosts in their own right, as we gaze past none the wiser. Colleagues, I implore you all to heed these warnings. This is not an attempt to sow fear nor to reap political benefit. I am merely asking, even praying, that you reread and support the legislation being presented today. As you know, the contents of PB 647-A would start the process of a nationwide registry for these foul creatures. We must know their whereabouts. It is our right to know. If the homeowner knows which hour the burglar will breach, it's he who will have the power to stay awake all night. It's time now to keep awake. Yes, stay awake and let us begin to discover exactly where our former friends reside so we can unmask them for what they truly are, the doppelgangers of a civilized people. End of excerpt, 10:32 a.m.
So you've made Senator Kelly from the X-Men here.
100% Senator Kelly analog.
Love it.
Absolutely. So this is a world where magic is beginning to reemerge.
Okay,
and
yeah. Mm-hmm.
the mutated humanoids called spark bearers now have begun to take over, have begun to make up enough of a percentage of the population that world leaders are beginning to be alarmed.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a stat block for Senator Jeff Wiseman, just as he is normally. He's
Wonderful.
a medium humanoid. He's lawful evil, AC of 12, 54 hit points, and a speed of 30 feet. Middling stats, but he is very, very intelligent. He has a 20 intelligence. He has a couple traits. He has a lead from the back trait. Any ally of Senator Wiseman's is heavily inclined to use all action economy available to protect and defend him. So if he has any allies, they will do whatever it takes to step in front of him and take damage in his stead. He also has a rally action. Senator Wiseman selects one creature he can see within 30 feet, granting it advantage on its next D20 test.
Nice.
He also has anti-spark armor. This, at first, was going to be anti-doppelganger armor. Mm-hmm. My first idea of this was the other way around, and this was actually a hero NPC, like an ally. Mm-hmm. As you're kind of storming the ranks of doppelgangers, this would be someone kitted out in armor, specifically able to kind of avoid, like block the detect thoughts, kind of put a blocker mm-hmm. for the transformation aspect, the shape-changing aspect, something like that. And then once I changed to this idea, I just made it an easier way for an evil Tony Stark to exist.
Cool.
So this guy just has anti-mutant armor.
Love it.
That can be activated, donned, and doffed as an action. And then we get down here. This is the stat block for Senator Wiseman. If he is in his armor, again, still lawful evil, medium humanoid. The armor is not bulky or anything, just kind of shapes around his frame. It boosts his AC up to 17, his HP up to 186, and he gains a fly speed of 50 feet.
Ooh, fun.
His dexterity and his constitution are also boosted up to 17 and 18 respectively. He also gains a number of skills, resistances, and immunities. He can't be paralyzed, petrified, or stunned. He gains true sight out to 15 feet. He gains skill proficiencies in acrobatics, athletics, and intimidation, and he is resistant to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, air damage, and poison damage. Moving down to the traits and actions part of his stat block, he still has the rally action and the lead from the back trait, so those stay in place. He has legendary resistances, 3 a day or 4 a day in his lair, which we'll get to in a second. He has a mutant neutralizer trait that says he has advantage on all saving throws prompted by a spark-bearing creature.
Great.
He has a multi-attack action. He can take 2 focus pulse attacks, and he can replace one of those with a rally action if he wants to. Focus pulse, it's melee or ranged attack. Basically Iron Man, the pulsing bolts that he has out of his hands that deals force damage. And then a pulsator beam. 40-foot long, 5-foot wide line, a failure of a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. That begets a creature, on average, 54 force damage.
Okay.
If they succeed, half of that damage.
Great.
He also has one legendary action, which is called Reposition. He allows himself to move up to half of his speed without provoking attacks of opportunity.
Really giving Syndrome vibes, though. Guy hates...
Very Syndrome. Very Syndrome,
hates people with mutant powers so much that he needs a suit that gives him mutant powers to deal with it. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So we're going to move down to the lair. I call this Parliament Building Floor 3, the East Wing. If your party encounters Senator Wiseman within his chambers in the Parliament Building, it acts as a lair. Within the basement of the building is an anti-mutation prototype codenamed the Spark Jammer. While within his lair and the Spark Jammer is active, Senator Wiseman has true sight and blind sight out to 45 feet, an advantage on all perception, insight, intimidation, and deception checks. If the Spark Jammer is active, any creature other than the Senator is subject to the following effects. Any abilities granted from a spark are unusable. All Constitution saving throws are made at disadvantage, and all damage taken is increased by 1d6 force damage.
Ooh. You got to take out the machine first.
The idea is to take out the machine first, which is my third stat block all the way down here at the bottom. This is the Spark Jammer machine. It's a small construct. It's unaligned, an armor class of 21, 50 hit points, and a speed of 0. It is 100% stationary. It has no intelligence, wisdom, or charisma scores. It automatically fails those saving throws, but it is immune to blinded, burned, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, and poisoned. So if your saves are going to do any of those things, they don't matter anyway. It has a strength of 10, a dex of 8, and a constitution score of 25. It resists non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, fire, force, and poison damage.
Nice.
It also has blind sight out to 120 feet, so it can see you coming. A few traits here. It has a regeneration trait, which is pretty common in constructs of this nature. Spark Jammer regains 10 hit points at the start of its turn if it has at least 1 hit point. It doesn't require air, food, drink, or sleep to survive. It just exists. And its only action is called Force Shield. The Spark Jammer targets itself or one creature it can see within 60 feet of itself. The target gains 10 temporary hit points, and its AC increases by 2 until the end of the Spark Jammer's next turn.
Great.
So all it can do is protect itself. But it is much, much easier to try and destroy this thing first before you go up and face the Senator, is if you are unable to, or you can't get down there, or you feel like you don't have time. The actual fight with the Senator and his allies is going to be much, much more dangerous.
Well, the Spark Jammer definitely has military guards around it.
Well, 100%. It's a combat
behind a
in and of
locked
itself.
door.
I thought at first maybe I would make some type of walkthrough of like this sub basement. I didn't think I had enough time to do it justice, but also I feel like that's kind of something that can be left up to a dungeon master. If you're really dropping this into a game, I don't want to like... I don't want to make something too specific and not have it fit somewhere else. But I do imagine, this would be heavily laden with traps surrounding it, lots of fortified doors with passcodes, and so I suppose this is still within the world that has no magic, but the non-magic technological version of abjurational wards and things like that. And yes, many, many, many guards. But that's what I came up with. Senator Jeff Wiseman, championing Parliament Bill PB 647A.
I think it's great. I really enjoyed this a lot. I think just as a plot and especially building it on top of what you made for the mutants, I think is really cool and clever. And, you've really, I think, designed within those two prompts a very interesting like mini campaign setup situation. That I would be delighted to run. Make some simple characters who have limited spell casting, have some sort of particular focus within that spell casting, as mutants would, spark bearers who kind of get embroiled in this plot as this senator starts to come for them, and they have to either rise or fall, do some cool stuff, have some like superhero-y fantasy action adventure. That would be a very fun little mini campaign. I think I would really enjoy running.
That was the goal, is to capture as closely as I could within the confines of D&D the superhero fantasy of like discovering you have powers and then immediately being thrust into this situation where you are now a target that you didn't ask to be.
Yeah, and maybe you throw in like a little bit of preamble, you throw in a couple of minor adventures, acts of heroism that sort of put you into the mind of like, oh, we are heroes, and like this is, scary and strange, but is also worth using to help people. Yeah. And then this sort of is your second act twist thing that pushes the characters to now have to make the choice. How worth it is it to you now that you've seen what you're capable of and have done some good in the world? Things are going to get a little bit harder, but I think you're setting up something very cool there with the establishment of the world lore in the previous prompt, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that episode, what are you doing? What are you doing here? You got to go back and listen to 2 episodes ago. Listen to episode 52 for our post-apocalypse mutants to understand the rest of this lore. But I think this is good. This is fun. I definitely appreciate just a normal guy who
just a guy.
Makes himself powerful. If you get this armor off of him is the thing. If you get this armor off of him, he's no slouch, but like he's relatively ineffective.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like he has no attacks.
Yeah.
I suppose it's just
he could do an unarmed strike. He could do an improvised weapon, I'm sure, but like he's not proficient in any weapons. It doesn't appear. He's not going to do a lot of damage with anything else. He's depending, his lead from the back trait is really what it's all about. That and rally, he's depending on other people to protect him.
100%.
Without the armor,
all of his,
he's useless.
Worthless.
But I like it. I think it was very interesting of you to kind of flip the script there a little bit, turn the players into that side of things. And I enjoy it. I enjoy the the interpretation and the looseness with the prompt that got you here, because I think you landed something that's very fun.
Yeah, I absolutely think that with a few tweaks, some branching out to the stat block, that it can be really, really great.
Yeah. Could be fun.
And that's always what the updates are for, though, right? Where
Indeed.
you follow the prompt the first time, and then the update, you can kind of shape it into what your brain wants it to be.
Indeed. Adjust it a little bit. But I appreciate your take. I always appreciate your assistance in clarifying an idea a little bit. And letting me know which parts of it are good and worth keeping, and which parts of it maybe not so much.
Well, same.
Yeah.
You've done that many, many times for me too. So that is the benefit of having a creative partner.
Absolutely.
That is not afraid of critique.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely true. Well, Michael, shall we roll for what we are going to make next week?
Absolutely.
We have our big list of homebrew prompts. If you've got a prompt for something you'd like to see us make in this show, go ahead and shoot us a message. You can send us an email here at collegeofcreationpod@gmail.com, or if you're feeling like it, you can head on over to the Patreon. That's patreon.com/collegeofcreationpod, and you can join at the free tier. Absolutely no money required to see all of the good stuff that we've made, see all the episodes, and shoot us a hey, hello, how are ya? Michael, I am rolling, and that is a 4.
A 4. We're coming back home again. We're going to make another subclass.
Yes.
This one is very basic and very open. This is only 3 words. A cowboy subclass.
Okay, nice.
No class delineation, as long as it's a cowboy.
The folks over at So You Want to Be a DM also recently made a little. They did a little live creation of some cowboy artificer subclass, I believe. An artificer and a bard.
Yep.
That they tried out making homebrew cowboy versions of. So if you're interested in more cowboy content, go over to So You Want to Be a DM. They've been on the show before, and we enjoy them a lot. And you can check out what they make, and you can wait with bated breath to see what we make next week and see how it compares.
So cowboy subclass. Thank you, Kel Scott from TikTok for that.
Thank you, Kel
prompt.
Scott.
We appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. I am not sure what I'm going to go with. I have some ideas already about what might be fun.
Same.
Michael, it has been a pleasure, as always. And do you have anything to say to the people before we say goodbye?
Dan, you know that I always have something to say to the people before we say goodbye. If you are creating something and you get to an end point-ish and you feel that you don't like it, shelve it, table it for a second, show it to somebody else that you trust, and then come back to it later. Because I promise there's something in there that is usable, even if it is not following the same path as you thought it would originally. It will get there. I promise you.
Fresh
eyes. So don't give up on your
important.
ideas. Yeah. Fresh eyes, if that is somebody else or yourself in a month's time.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely good to step away and come back later. A huge part of my creative process is getting something to a stopping point and then coming back to it later. I don't know why that works, but it does.
I think there's like a scientific explanation for that. Like there's a certain amount of removal that you act like a stranger to your own creation. Like your brain perceives your own things as if they were something quasi new. I don't know what the actual study is or what it's called or where to find it, but I know there's something like if you step back enough, you can trick your brain into like thinking that things you created were from somebody else.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Trick your brain into thinking that the things that you created were created by somebody else, and then be absolutely brutal with that other person.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks, Michael, so much for podcasting with me. It's been a pleasure, as always.
As always.
Until next time, folks, we're so happy that you joined us, and we'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
Goodbye.